a moment.
Міжнародний довкіллєвий форум United for Nature Agenda for Ukraine триває, і наша фінальна на сьогодні.
Forum continues. This is the final panel for today on decarbonization of the production industry, moderated by Irina Sopron, founder of the Geological Investment Group. We're out of timing already, so if your speakers would be concise, we would be extremely grateful to them. So greetings, and I thank all of you who waited till the final panel, because the subsoil is a very important part of our natural resources. So let us talk about the role of the production industry in the system of the environment. So the topic, it would be to the decarbonization of the production industry. Let me introduce our speakers today. Yevhen Fedorenko, Deputy Minister on Euro-integration, then Roman Opima, Head of the State Service of Geology and Subsoil of Ukraine. We have Artem Petrenko, the Executive Director of the Association of the Gas Production Companies of Ukraine. So, since we're limited in time, I would like to kind of reduce my intro, and instead let's go straight to the questions. So, Yevgen, Ukraine, when undertaking some commitments, in part related to the association agreement, well, Ukraine took some major commitments, including the commitments related to the production industry as well. So there's some fairly significant challenges, in part related to the fact that we would need to make our subsoil greener. That sounds a bit childish, but that's a serious challenge. So we as an industry, we need to kind of accept these rules and to realize to what degree are we ready to kind of implement them, and whether we are ready to such changes. So how would you assess our level of readiness to the implementation of such changes? Because we know that the reform have taken place, which is already being implemented. So what's your assessment? Well, thank you for the question. As a Deputy Minister on European integration, I would like to say that as part of the self-screening in 2023, we've covered all the industries in accordance to all the acquis communiqué of the EU. So, when doing the self-screening of subsoil, we understood that we need to harmonize some of our legislation with two basic directives of the EU that are regulating the subsoil use kind of area. That's only is related to the kind of part of usage. But whenever we're talking about the use of subsoil and harmonizing that with the European criteria for subsoil use and to European standards, I wouldn't be focusing only on the use of subsoil area. Since subsoil is a part of the natural resources, now we would need to have a comprehensive approach. And whenever we're talking about the subsoil use and the implementation of European norms, we have to talk about things like implementation of the directive on the waste of the production industry. That's an enormous portion. Before that, we had a panel on the waste management. So we have to say that most of the waste generated in our country, if I'm not mistaken, but by different statistics, over 80% of the waste of the production industry. So this is a very complicated reform, and I think that it will be one of the last sectoral reforms that we shall be regulating in part of reforms on waste management. Because it's just a question whether Ukraine is ready, whether the business is ready, which is dealing exactly with the subsoil use, to fulfill the requirements that are identified by the directives and regulations of the European Union, because it's all about money primarily, and this is the defining criteria.
And we still need to really develop legislation. We have to have a dialogue with businesses. We need to be able to hear our community, our public, who's very active in the field of environment protection. So we have to move with these matters, because sooner or later, hopefully sooner, when we open the negotiation chapter 27 on environment protection, we'll have to be able to speak about deadlines and terms, how much time will be needed for this or that measures. We have not to forget about peats, about forest areas. We'll be having to speak about the sustainability of the extraction process and preservation of natural resources. So when we speak about the reform, it is about making changes and amendments to the Code on Subsoil Management, and we will have to secure a balance between environment protection and business interests. We will have, jointly with our colleagues and partners, to think about that. The businesses have been really actively involved. They had plentiful and fruitful discussions with Parliamentary Line Committee in an attempt to build European rules of the game based on deregulation, transparency, decarbonization. I think businesses were able to voice up their concerns and feedbacks about practicalities of reform implementation. And Roman will have more on that, because he chairs a body in charge of it immediately. But just a couple of words, without stealing much of your time, about our plans. When we speak about our plans, how we are going within the scope of our European aspirations this year, the key task the Ministry for Environmental Protection has set for itself in the area of subsoil management. It is about creating a European-style modern institution, working on that under the one-stop-shop window principle. We'll need to think how to implement European directives. Say, if we are to work on hydrogen, the EU will require to use price and non-pricing criteria for that. Speaking about decarbonization, we are gradually moving towards using best available technologies, the ones that will be less harmful for our environment, for our people. So ultimately it will be about seeking for balance. When we talk about the European Green Deal arrangement, when we speak about the climate agenda of our country, we cannot go beyond decarbonization of extraction industries, because according to some recent estimates made in 2023, if we take aggregate greenhouse emissions, atmospheric emissions, we will see a huge variation of the parts contributed by the extractive industry. A clear hint on the need to get more reliable figures about realistic emissions from extracting enterprises. It will be necessary for us to set up a dialogue with the public on the compliance with Aarhus Convention, and my ministry is ready to work on the context already this year. And just to remind you as well that we have an MOU signed with the European Commission, and decarbonization effort is the priority one, number one in this MOU, which again speaks of how highly it is regarded by our European partners. We had our climate panel today, and Deputy Minister mentioned the Ukraine facility. And again, within this facility, we will see matters of subsoil usage and decarbonization figuring out there prominently. So I think today is the first day when we are to publicly announce our public dialogue about that. We had the climate strategy officially presented today, the strategy of how Ukraine will be moving this direction. And this is the first time when we speak about inaugurating decarbonization of the extraction industry. And the fact that the subsoil reaches are present at this important environmental forum is a sure sign that we consider the subsoil as part of the whole ecosystem. We do plan a range of measures, a range of rules, clear-cut ones, comprehensible for businesses, for the government, for the public, for each and every individual, about the role of the subsoil in the public life of our country. We move on, though. A question to Roman. Businesses in general assessed those cardinal changes in the state geological service in terms of shifts in the approach towards subsoil management. The feedbacks were rather positive across the board. And if revisited in retrospective, we would see a quality dialogue between the government and businesses, the government being represented by the State Geology and Subsoil Service of Ukraine. We know that the service has been posting updates on a regular, in a systemic way about recent developments. Yet we see lots that they post the auction. But again, we also hear that not all of those lots can be realistically acquired and used, given the current legislation. Still more that we've heard about impending huge changes in the domain. So what is your estimate, or what needs to be done to see that lots acquired by businesses provide most quality and most value for them? Okay, thank you. As we've started with questions, I will do my best to answer them during the course of my presentation. Prime Minister Shmyhal and Minister Strelets mentioned today certain positive results, certain progress achieved in the reform of the subsoil management domain. I'd like to add some nice details to this overview of the reform. And just a couple of slides for you. The State Geological and Subsoil Service, jointly with the Ministry for Environment Protection, has been working on three main reforms. that is digitizing its services, modernizing the legislation to attract investment, and improving the oversight function of the government. It is done specifically to mitigate the man-in-the-middle factor, if you will, to facilitate permits and authorizations, and to facilitate access to public information. This will further guarantee the position of my service as a servicing institution. A couple of words about the services we offer. We have three types of services, three baskets, as we call them. The first one is what every investor coming onto the market needed, and this is getting access to geological information, then acquiring rights, and finally communicating with the state as the subsoil manager. So we had 106 lots offered. Of them, 70 plus were acquired, and 465 special permits were issued across 2023. A huge number. The amount of stamp duty collected from that was 2.4 billion hryvnias, an absolute record number, again from the sales of the lots in electronic auctions. Sand has become the most wanted resource. 55 permits were issued, and 25 were sold on auctions. We had also other types of reserves, like amber, others. For the 5 years of e-auctions in existence, about 400 special permits for 4.2 billion hryvnias have been issued. More detailed information can be received from our presentation that we upgrade every year to show the number of lots, the results of the trades. You do know that ProZorro system has the only criterion, the price one. Meanwhile, there are certain European terms and conditions regarding the hydrocarbon lots and certain criteria to participants. Besides price, other things also involve specific mechanisms of place development. Another service that we digitize is the electronic cabinet. From 13th of April last year, we stopped accepting paperback documents. Everything has to be submitted online. For the 9 months, we were able to process more than 900 applications, each one of them being worked on for no more than 5 days, as prescribed by the law. The functionality of this electronic cabinet is being regularly updated. Now are working to introduce electronic registration of geological works, and we expect this to come online next month. Also, regular online reports on all the reporting form, like number 5, number 6, number 7. We set up a state geological portal with all the information from some 15 databases and registries about wells, plays, some resource materials for construction purposes, and fields of strategic importance, including those of ores. This map, and I'd like to point your attention to it, also contains information about the land, information we get from the land cadastre, as well as information about natural reserve areas and territories that we get from the Ministry for Environment Protection. Unfortunately, at the moment, we only have information about national parks. That is, we don't have information about natural reserves of the regional and national level. Though, again, under the law on national infrastructure and the national database, such information has to be provided by the Ministry for Environment Protection together with Oblast, Rayon, city administration. So the information has to be online on our geospatial data portal. Unfortunately, we don't have this information yet. If it would exist there, we would gladly use it for our operations. But, well, we are working with the Ministry for Environment Protection. We try to contact local municipal governments to convince them and share the information. According to the law, 3 databases, the base on special permits, on oil and artesian wells, these will have to have their security levels upgraded because of the topmost level of security. It's about cyber protection measures, cyber security considerations are at place, and we do hope that by the end of the year, all of the registries, including the one of special permits, will be protected in due way to allow us issuing those permits and abstracts from official database for the purpose completely online, electronically. As regards changes and amendments to the legislation to make things more attractive for investors and to enhance the controlling function, I think everyone knows that thanks to our MPs, an important bill was adopted to introduce changes and amendments to the subsoil code. Within 60 days, working days, land usage permit can be, subsoil usage permit can be obtained. And the whole documenting process, including EIA, can be completed in not more than 5 months. Other innovations besides the electronic cabinet, again, the electronic system is operational, more than 900 applications processed, more than 400 of special permits issued. 14 companies have been able to use it by not selling their options. Permits for the development of natural reserves on areas not exceeding 25 hectares have been introduced. We do expect more of potential users appearing this year in connection with the land reform and some changes to it that are going to come into force this February. My service identified 8 facilities, permits on which were in ownership of the nationals from the aggressor country. We initiated investigation in courts against them, effectively stopping operations of 21 special permits. The service also lodged calculations of losses from unauthorized use of natural resources and subsoil reserves on temporary occupied areas of Donetsk, Lugansk Oblast and the Crimean Autonomous Republic. It concerns 220 facilities, and the damage amounts to more than 500 billion hryvnias. the calculation continues. More and more attention is being given, as has been mentioned, to the European aspects within the meaning of the Memorandum on Strategic Cooperation, and there is a legislation already adopted on a material act, which is a strategy about critical minerals adopted by the European Parliament recently, in which Ukraine has been named a strategic partner. We also work on changes to the second hearing of a bill on the national program for national reserve and raw material base until 2030 to better identify minerals of critical importance and identify priorities of the national geological program.
So, in conclusion, I would like to say that the main challenges for the service last year were as follows: lack of funding, particularly on geological surveys and the geological inspections, then current limitations in the amount of information, which is considered as restricted on the portal of geospatial data, and the lack of personnel, the lack of young experts willing to work in public institutions. Our priorities for 2024: further digitalization of services, and we're going to launch a special e-permits. We'll prepare new kind of plots of subsoils for e-tenders and calculation of damages and other important work that would facilitate the recovery of our country. That's it for me. Thank you. Hopefully I've answered the question. Let me clarify a bit. Thank you, Roman. Just to clarify, in order for the potential investors to be able to analyze a certain part of the subsoil that he's planning to develop or which is nominated by the service, you would need to have full access to the geological portal. So it's important that it would have all the quality information which is available within the Ministry of Environment and regionally at level of state administrations and local administrations and their own departments of environment, so that this information would be kind of posted on one geological kind of source of information. All right. Everyone had access to the portal before the war. Well, now this access is limited due to security risks, but the public officials of our service and all the public agencies, if they want, they can access to this portal and process the papers that based on the materials that I've mentioned. We also share the protocols when we receive information from the Ministry of Environment, State Water Service, State Cadastre of Land, and we kind of plot this information on the interactive map. Thank you. We move on, and we have a well-balanced panel. We have kind of the representative authorities, the business, and we have two associations. So a question to Dmytro. You are representing the Committee of Subsoil Use by the European Business Association. So you have a lot of subsoil users in your association. Over 50 users of subsoil are members of this association. So we would need to understand whether the business is ready for this decarbonization rules that, well, sooner or later will become a reality. Because according to my information, the mining enterprises from Europe and from other countries have a task for themselves. In terms of decarbonization, by 2040, 2050, to complete the transition to the production process where the greenhouse gas emissions would equal to zero. Would the Ukrainian business be ready for such challenges? Thank you, Irina. I think I won't be able to speak in such a calm voice as Roman, because decarbonization for the business, it's all about the kind of expenditures. So some of the ideas for the Ukrainian production sector and the mining sector in terms of environmental safety, in terms of decarbonization. So the kind of mining or the production industry is also facing with the pressure of the society, government on the reduction of emissions. I think, well, everyone knows that there were some considerable changes in the financial sector. The banks, they reject funding the projects with significant carbon trace, which is particularly the case where there is a significant greenhouse gas emissions, and surely the mining industry is one of them. And the most recent project funded by the EBRD in Ukraine and the mining area was 2012. That's a mine in Donbass. So these changes are kind of based on the commitments for the reduction of emissions. And these emissions are the result of the use of the certain raw materials for the production of electricity. We believe some of the companies have to comply with 4 strategies. First, to invest in those solutions with renewable energy in order to support its activity and by reducing the footprint, by implementing the energy-efficient technologies and practices to reduce the overall consumption of energy, and to learn the innovative production methods, meaning to use the less carbon-intensive technologies. And, for example, the CO2 could be captured from the industrial source using different technology, absorption, membrane division of gas, and other steps. So these are very important steps for the business in order to make sure they're aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and to adapt to the ever-changing financial landscape. Because we can see that most of the countries in Europe and in the world, in Ukraine, are adopting certain changes. A series of international organizations that are operating currently in Ukraine, they are issuing grants on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Strategy at companies, including the companies from the production industry. Surely it is a complicated and complex path, but it ensures the sustainable future, combining the global kind of goals and world financial trends. So a big kind of assistant in decarbonization is the financial sector, comes from the financial sector. Okay, thank you, Dmitro. So, based on my understanding, in order for the business to take these challenges, there has to be some financial support by the financial institutions, international ones, and from the state. So this is a dialogue today that it's just a start of this dialogue. And the platforms, like today's platform, it has to be frequent so that there will be discussions and debates, because only through discussions that you come up to a solution that would satisfy all the parts of the society and the country. And in this case, every one of us would understand where we are moving to. So, Artem, you are representing the gas production sector. And Natural gas is a source of energy for the European Union, for us as well, so under conditions of the present days, under conditions of the war. Definitely, this kind of resource is the basics for our international security and, well, national security. So, in terms of decarbonization, I wanted to ask you, what is your assessment whether the gas production business in Ukraine is ready to take these challenges of decarbonization, whether we're ready to make the production process for hydrocarbons in a more environmental, with kind of less emissions of greenhouse gas. Well, thank you for the question. The gas production companies, we are already reducing the emissions of our activity. So, and the production of natural gas, should you compare that with other raw materials, is the one that presents least amount of dangerous substances for the environment. So the gas production companies were the pioneers of registration of the procedures for the assessment of damages for the environment. So the companies, they have a very responsible attitude to that. They are introducing new technologies in order to have less impact on the environment. And natural gas is the key element of our long-term security and safety. And before 2022, everyone was saying that we need to refuse some of the raw materials to transfer to the green electricity, but the situation of 2022 clearly demonstrated that the world and Europe cannot completely refuse or not use some of the raw materials. So despite all this transition to green energy, the European Union is actively using the coal, it's actively using the natural gas, because the companies and the states have clearly understood that under current technological conditions they cannot fully produce their own needs based on only gas or green technology. So natural gas is used very actively, and over the next at least 10 years the demand for natural gas will increase. The example is the situation that we can see over the past 2 years, because before the full-scale war, the Russian Federation controlled 40% of the gas market in Europe. Now, due to the sanctions and the diversification of supplies, their percentage is reducing, and we can see that the gas production companies, the exporting companies, they're increasing, and they're coming to the European Union companies. For example, the US, they have become the leader in terms of LNG. They kind of take the market out of Russia. They are exporting the LNG, and also there's an increase in the production of the natural gas in Norway. They're the leader in terms of supplying gas to the European continent. So Norway surely is not reinforcing in the manner as the state service, but they're running the competitions, they're selling the licenses, because Europeans understand that receiving new permits is all about the security. So I would like to express words of gratitude to State Service for Geology and Subsoil, who are openly doing this electronic tenders, electronic options, because the idea of involving the national and international investors is very important. You have to understand, dear colleagues, that anywhere in the world there's this active work on further facilitation of projects, on gas production projects. For example, in Shelf in Africa, the companies are investing much money because they understand that the gas is the key resource to balance the energy system. And you can see on the news, for example, in Texas, when it's cold in Texas, they're actively using the natural gas because green energy, under current conditions, is unable to supply the proper amount of heat and electricity for the population. Now, talking about the technologies on the production of gas and reducing the impact on the environment, during the production of the natural gas, in some countries, including Ukraine, the molecules of natural gas contain CO2. And its emissions are fairly small, should you compare with the other areas of subsoil use, but still there are some. And Europe and Norway, they're actively working, they're engaging investors, and the state is helping that because they're constructing a specialized complex, like a facility where the CO2 would be pumped in order not to be incinerated by the enterprises while using the natural gas. Speaking about Canada, they're actively supporting the oil and gas production companies with money to have decarbonization programs. Then Qatar, it's also investing money in LNG projects. But we're totally talking here about the state support, but we understand these are large production companies, the exporters, they have the money for this, because in many countries the oil and gas industry is one of the main industries for budget. It's talking about the Ukrainian realities. Well, the natural gas that we're all consuming is actively produced in Ukraine. We've seen some positive trends for private oil and gas companies. Before the full-scale aggression, we had some record-breaking outcomes, but the shelling, the partial occupation of the Kharkiv region, it had an impact on the production. But you can take a look at the figures that we have mentioned to preserve the oil and gas production level thanks to the efforts of the employees of the company and thanks to the effective work with the cabinet and the Verkhovna Rada on the establishment of the sustainable subsoil use approaches. We had some wonderful discussions. Now we have to understand that, and as the Prime Minister has mentioned, this year Ukraine will be having this heating season without the use of the imported gas for consumption purposes. So we currently use the gas that is produced in Ukraine. The gas that was potentially imported, that was primarily the gas for the storage in the Ukrainian underground gas storage facilities. So this is the first season where we are using the gas that we produced. So produced by the state companies, by the public companies who will sell that for commercial users or during the transparent kind of tendering procedures where almost 1 billion cubic meters of gas have been sold. Talking about the gas production companies, surely the full-scale aggression, the shelling, and the negative situation had some effect on the economic projects, but still the companies are using them, and the companies are using the technologies on drilling, special technologies on the disposal of certain gases, and there's new technologies in sniping as well. There's an active work on the improvement of new rules for new safety rules for the gas production, and finally the companies can officially use new technologies to support the gas and oil production for Ukraine. We also do the screening of damages and some other things. We are using diesel and we're using different other types of fuel, and the new technologies allow to reduce the level of emissions. But unfortunately, due to a full-scale war, we do have problems with the rent of equipment. Well, this is due to the limitation of the international servicing companies and the issue of transboundary payments, because, we have some limitations in terms of payment under the contracts for currency operations. So we believe that in spite of the full-scale work, we continue to comply with our international commitments. Ukraine has demonstrated itself that despite of the situation that was unseen for the last 65 or 70 years, we preserve our gas production possibilities in order to finally join the European family. Now, what's important? We preserve the production. We support the operation of the underground gas storage facilities, and the European companies are pumping and storing their gas in Ukraine because our gas storage facilities are protected, and our gas transportation system, it continues to operate effectively, and the operator of this system is now saying that the amount of technological gas is reducing, meaning that there's less impact on the environment.
Thank you, Artyom. Yeah, hope I answered your questions. Just let me a question. If we have prophets of gas extraction, why the experts of it are prohibited? Thank you for the question. As they say, being not a member of the Security and Defense Council, I cannot answer it. But from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022, we at the association were actively involved in negotiations with the government, with the Naftogaz of Ukraine, OGSC, regarding exports. At the moment, the government is of opinion that the ban should stay. And Naftogaz has been actively buying the gas extracted by private companies. It was insubstantial in 2022. Last year, the Naftogaz became more active, buying of the gas extracted by private developers. Again, currently we are staying with Ukrainian gas, the one extracted in Ukraine throughout this heating season. I'd like to thank our panelists and those who have remained in the room. I'd like to thank all of you for participation, for the fact that, again, this is the first time we are able to discuss sustainable subsoil management and subsoil usage. Our talk of today makes for us start of upcoming discussions on that, to see that subsoil usage in Ukraine remains active, rational, sustainable, working for the benefit of every Ukrainian national. I'd like to thank everyone for their attention. Thank you, Irina. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presentations, for keeping to time, and we are to stay here to hear the wrap-up remarks from the Deputy Minister for Environment, Mr. Krasnoludsky. Again, we had 5 panel discussions within the scope of our United for Nature Agenda for Ukraine International Forum to expound the range of issues with environment and environment protection in terms of approximation to the European legislation. We spoke about green transition, natural subsoil reserves. We spoke about things to be done with waste by Ukraine. We learned from the example of Lviv and the dump site and the ways they are rebuilding it. We spoke about CO2 emission reduction. And Artyom was right during the last panel discussion when he said that Prime Minister announced today that for the first time in history, the independent Ukraine has been sailing through this winter season using the gas of its own extraction. And we had 3 presentations to hear about reforms in the forestry sector, digitization of environment matters, and ways in which they are going to reinvent the State Environmental Control Institution. These were among the topics to definitely merit further exploration and discussion in an upcoming event or events. Also beyond the limits of this forum. So thank you, dear panelists, and thank you, dear audience. And we are nearly good to wrap up with words from Alexander Krasnoludsky. Just 30 seconds for that. This is the second forum, United for Nature. This one has been dedicated to the current situation with Ukrainian environment. The current situation versus we had before the start of the Russian full-scale invasion. We spoke about measures to bring Russia to responsibility for damage and losses it has inflicted on the Ukrainian land. And Alexander Krasnolutsky, welcome, with some final remarks. Thank you, dear guests and participants. Every decent event has a trend to end at some point. We identified vectors, key vectors of further developments in our country for the upcoming year. Also, in the scope of our move towards membership in the EU, we spoke about future of the climate policy. We spoke about waste management and water management policy. We spoke about the national state environmental control. We heard lots of nice ideas that can be boiled out to continuation of circular policy implementation in the country. We've confirmed our joint vision expressed in the strategic document on environment protection based on the current needs of Ukraine with assistance from our international partners. The United for Nature Agenda for Ukraine platform unites Ukrainian professionals and activists and their foreign counterparts. And we had ministers for environment protection from Moldova, Romania, we had the Bulgarian colleague online. And on behalf of Minister for Environment, Roman Strelets, and me myself, I'd like to thank each and every participant and panelists for active involvement, for expressing your positions regarding topics of discussion. I'd like to thank partners, UNEP, Panel 3, EU project on circular economy. This forum is a continuation of the previous such forum that we had back last October with support from the GPO to assess the damage inflicted by the Russian invasion onto Ukraine. This time we spoke more about recovery, which was the keynote point of our discussion. I'm sure that there will be many more dialogues, such dialogues in the future. So thank you until we meet next time. And we heard the first Deputy Minister for Environment, Alexander Krasnolutsky, with final remarks. Thank you for being.